Hello everybody, welcome to Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Nils Frahm, All Melody. Nils Frahm is a German composer, sorry for butchered pronunciation as per usual, who probably doesn't really classify as electronic, but undoubtedly falls within my typical boundaries for review material. I first heard his name when he was featured on a track from DJ Shadow's The Mountain Will Fall a while back, the track Bergschrund. Admittedly not the biggest of standouts from that album, but it was a pretty enjoyable IDM type thing, and when I saw this album top the iTunes electronic charts, yes, made it to #1 for like a day, I figured this might be someone worth checking out. When preparing for the In Brief segment, though, this guy did not end up being the kind of artist I thought he was. I was expecting something maybe kind of like John Hopkins, between the Shadow feature and his use of the piano and some small iTunes previews I picked up on. Nope, as it turns out, this guy is far more of a pianist than a producer. Basically all of his albums were just straight piano compositions with not much other accompaniment. Probably closer to classical or jazz music than electronic in general, but the guy is clearly building off of the Brian Eno ambient fundamentals. All his stuff has a very Eno-esque vibe. If you've heard music for Airports or Plateau of Mirror, or hell, if you heard that last Bibio album, you know the kind of general area that Nils Frahm operates within. Yet, I would not characterize this guy as a ripoff of Eno either. He does seem to be doing more of his own thing that, while very close to Eno sonically, does a bit more exploration musically. It's more improvisational and wanders around more than your average Eno project, so yeah, how about I go down his discography so far? I started here since this is the earliest regular album of his widely available for streaming and purchase, and I was definitely taken aback by the fact that this sounded like some kind of early 20th century kind of composition. Something about it sounded like it came out of a period like 100 years before its actual release. Definitely some haunting stuff here. Thumbs up. This one didn't sound nearly as antiquated to me. There were some cool marimba sounds here that often came in as accompaniment, and just the arrangements seem to be much more modern sounding than the bells. Also, there's what sounds like some kind of old projector sound throughout many of the tracks that I think is mainly the piano hammers hitting bits of felt because Frahm didn't want to disturb his neighbors, giving the album some more sense of pulse than the last one, so yeah, really nice stuff here. This one I admittedly wasn't as keen on, given how it was the closest Frahm sounded to straight Eno ripoff, and it was a bit dull, but in his defense, he made the album after breaking his thumb and had to play the piano with only 9 fingers, so I'll give the guy major props for this anyway. This is a live album that I mistook for a studio album and didn't look closely enough at the track listing. I think, though, if you only get one previous album from the guy, I would make it this one. Despite being mostly piano as always, it does legitimately have some good variety and kept me interested the whole way through. Really nice stuff here again. Also caught me up on a bunch of the non-album singles. Don't really have much to say about this one. It's solo piano, but it's very good solo piano. And unsurprisingly given his style, Frahm of course has a film soundtrack under his belt as well. And it's appropriately well executed and fun to listen to. Interestingly enough, it was also easily the most electronic sounding thing I heard from him up to that point. So yeah, definitely cool. Which brings us to here. Now, I did actually get iTunes previews of this album, and knew despite the fact that Frahm has so consistently stuck to his piano for most of his career, this particular album was actually going to move into more overtly electronic territory, and I'll just cut to the chase. I believe this album to be his best one to date. This is the album of his with the widest instrumental palette. On top of the usual compositions, there are tracks that prominently feature like these plinky synth sequences. Like, think the very beginning of Tangerine Dream's Tangram, or maybe LCD Sound System's Pulse V1. Like, you got tracks like Sunson, the title track, and #2, which feature this really prominently. On top of that, you hear like Electric Road's piano. You hear his pipe organ, which sounds more like some kind of flute to me throughout the album, highlighted on a track like Kaleidoscope. You hear actual percussion. I mean, technically. It's not much more than simple and muted kick drums for the most part, occasionally the sound of piano hammers moving on the straight piano tracks like My Friend the Forest or Forever Changeless. But again, it does consistently give these tracks some more pulse. Also, the final track on here, Harm Him, it's played on the harmonium, much like the final track from his Spaces album. Admittedly not the most satisfying of endings, and I don't like the really long silence at the end of that one, but you know, it's still cool. There's also trumpets and violins here, like on Fundamental Values, among others, and other synths that have a more orchestral feel to them. You even hear human voices. Not like actual singing English words, but like there's a small chorus of people who are harmonizing together, and whenever they show up, it's absolutely awesome. On tracks like Human Range, A Place, Momentum, and of course the intro, The Whole Universe Wants to Be Touched. That intro in particular gives me some vibes very similar to the intro title track of Steven Wilson's Grace for Drowning. And also the track Momentum. That gives me some very strong Andreas Vollenweider vibes in one part. Like, the first track from his Kryptos album sounded really similar to that one part of the track near the beginning, but this is somehow even more instrumentally rich and sonorous and satisfying, and that's saying a lot given how much I love Andreas Vollenweider for those exact reasons. Check that guy out, by the way, he's awesome. Now, a lot of these tracks seem specifically designed to flow into each other super smoothly. Like, take for instance the track Forever Changeless, which has the exact same chord progression and key and tempo as the track that came right before it, Human Range, leading me to often miss the track entirely. Same with the title track in number 2, while those aren't in the same key or tempo, I don't think. They're both very heavy on the synth sequences and deliver a very similar vibe. Also, both are over 9 minutes long and seem to zip by almost indistinguishably. Yeah, if there's any problem I might have with this album, is that it blends together almost too well. The entire thing seems to float by as if blurred together into one piece. I can remember some tracks that have more distinctive instrumentation and moments, but it's typically so seamless that I sometimes forget which moment goes with which track. But that's not that huge of a problem when you really get down to it. In the end, all I can really say is that I personally found this album to be freaking amazing. Every texture is warm and pleasurable, the production is pitch perfect, and the somewhat formless layout leads to an album that, while it can fall into the background easily, is also very nice to listen to up close and examine all the various textures. This is the kind of album I'm always going to be able to enjoy, and while I'd like to be able to tell some of the tracks apart a bit better, I think we got a serious, like, early year-end list contender already. This album is really goddamn amazing, and anyone into down-tempo music ought to check it out. Really glad I discovered this guy. I'm overall feeling an 8.7 out of 10. Awesome. But of course, it's just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time. I started here since this is the earlier...